When people talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, they tend to throw around a lot of numbers. The two sides have been talking on and off for more than 2 decades about creating a Palestinian state alongside Israel on 22% of the land that used to be mandatory Palestine. There are more than 4 million Palestinian refugees registered with the UN, a definition that includes both original refugees and their descendants. While no one thinks they will ever all return, their claims would have to be accommodated, at least symbolically, as part of any final resolution to the conflict. There are also more than 600,000 Jewish settlers living in settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, a number that has roughly tripled since 1990. To achieve peace, some of them would need to be moved elsewhere or the pre-1967 lines redrawn. But what are the big numbers behind the conflict? The financial incentives that are promoting, or as the case may be, preventing, the chances of achieving peace? For starters, the occupation costs money. Israel's defense budget last year, translated in dollar terms, was $21 billion, money that went both to defending the country externally and patrolling Palestinian lands which are under military rule. That's more than 5% of GDP and one of the highest rates per capita in the world, more than $2,000 for every Israeli citizen, man, woman, and child. But don't forget, too, that Israel's the world's biggest recipient of U.S. military aid. Last year, the two countries signed a package under which Israel will receive a whopping $38 billion of military aid over 10 years. The U.S. periodically pressures the Israeli government on the settlements and on other issues. But even when things are tense, the military aid remains untouched. So what about the Palestinian side? The Palestinians have suffered economically under the Israeli occupation because of checkpoints, travel and border restrictions, and planning permissions that limit where they can invest in the West Bank. Palestinian GDP per head is only about $3,000, less than a tenth of the roughly $36,000 per capita in Israel, which belongs to the club of rich countries called the OECD. Unemployment in the occupied Palestinian territories is now approaching 30%, compared with barely 4% in Israel, the lowest rate in that country in 4 decades. But there's big foreign money flowing to the Palestinians too. Mahmoud Abbas's Palestinian Authority gets a $4 billion a year budget that is paid for mostly by foreign donors, led by the US and the EU. While donations have been falling, the Palestinians are, alongside Israel, among the biggest per capita aid recipients in the world. A sizable chunk of this money goes to pay the salaries of tens of thousands of policemen, bureaucrats, and other civil servants employed by the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, who form the backbone of the Palestinian middle class. These people, who are key decision makers in the PA, have a vested interest in the status quo and, much like Israelis, feel no immediate financial pressures to make peace. The occupied territories are also a business and an economy in themselves. Israel exports some $5 billion a year worth of goods there, a trade from which both Israeli companies and the Palestinian middlemen who buy these goods profit. So what financial levers might be deployed to press the two sides to end one of the world's longest-running conflicts? The most draconian measure might be for the outside world, most notably the US, to threaten to cut off aid to either Israel or the Palestinians, or both. But for political reasons, this isn't likely to happen anytime soon. There's also an international activist movement pressuring Israel over the occupation, much the way apartheid-era South Africa was in its time. While the so-called BDS movement has claimed some victories, foreign investors in sectors ranging from high-tech to natural gas are still pouring billions of dollars into the Israeli economy, which is growing at a steady rate of 3 to 4%. So might positive incentives work? Leaks from the most recent round of peace talks under President Barack Obama spoke of billions of dollars of financial aid offered both to the Palestinian refugees and the Arab countries hosting them, and to Jewish Israelis and their descendants who were expelled from Arab countries when Israel was created in 1948. But even this wasn't enough to overcome the differences between the two sides, who broke off talks in 2014 and haven't spoken directly since. So can Donald Trump, a man who made his name in business, achieve what he calls the ultimate deal? As long as the conflict remains low level and the aid to both sides keeps flowing, there's little financial pressure on either side to make peace anytime soon. John Reed, Financial Times, Jerusalem.